All right, now we're having a good morning. All right.
Beautiful.
Those who didn't know what happened just before the camera started. It's good morning. It's good morning. And we have a sponsor for the week. The Bernsteins. Just the Bernsteins, or Josh Bernstein and Mrs. Bernstein. Both Bernsteins sponsoring for our week. Very appreciative. First of all, refuah shlema for our friend Yanki Flussberg, and also Yaakov Moshe Ben
and
Fredel Ita, and also because his son Penny is put on tefillin this week. Very exciting moment.
Wow.
Baruch Hashem. All right, wonderful. We are at the Mishnah.
Upshur?
We're
holding back on that?
We're holding the
upcoming
upshur of Yosef.
Okay.
Guys, not yet. Don't worry about that yet.
Okay. Well, we'll just
Other than coming.
up and coming. Okay. But we're on Pei Aleph Amud Beis at the Mishnah on the bottom. Hanisonim b'fnim shenis arvu b'nisonim b'chutz. As our parak continues, we're mixing up everything in this parak. So we're trying all different types of things. We've got now blood that came from a korban that was supposed to be applied inside the Beis HaMikdash, mixed up with blood for a korban that was supposed to be placed outside the Beis HaMikdash. So here it says yishbechu le'ama. Everyone agrees here. Now, Rabbi Eliezer had held before that we're going to apply it, right, out of, in a doubt, we're going to apply it. The Chum told us that you had to pour it out. Now everybody holds you pour this out. We're going to see in the Gemara why that is. Nasan b'chutz v'chazer v'nasan b'fnim. Now, let's say, always wonder what happens if the Kohen didn't check first. So now the Kohen goes outside first, and he applies some of this blood that's mixed together on the outer mizbeach first, and then then he goes back inside and he applies it inside. And he didn't check. He's not supposed to do this, but he does it. Kosher, then it's effective, right? Then it's effective. We're going to see what are the issues here that will be of concern. Bifnim v'chazer v'nasan b'chutz. Now, if he goes into the Beis HaMikdash first, and he applies the blood there first and then goes outside, Rabbi Akiva posel, Rabbi Akiva says, then it is not valid. The Chachamim machshirin, the Chachamim say it is valid. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Kol damim shenichnesu lechaper behechal psulin. Any blood that is supposed to be applied to the outer mizbeach, if it goes into the Beis HaMikdash, it ruins that blood. There's a psul, we're going to learn that from Sukkim, that anytime which korbanos this applies to is going to be subject to machlokas that we're going to see. But the blood goes into the heichal, so now this is mixture. So the part of the blood that went into the Beis HaMikdash is now pasul, so now you got to throw the whole thing out. The Chachamim say chatos bilvad. No, the Chachamim say this only applies to a korban chatos. If an outer chatos goes into the Beis HaMikdash, then the blood becomes pasul. But if it's a shlamim blood that got mixed in, then it's okay. Rabbi Eliezer says af ha'asham. Rabbi Eliezer is going to add in an asham, as is Rabbi Eliezer's continuing shita that an asham and chatos follow similar rules. Shenemar kachatas ka'asham, because there's a pasuk that tells us that the chatos and the asham have similar rules. So you're right. We agrees with the chachamim. He doesn't agree with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says that it applies to all korbanos, but he agrees with the chachamim. It only applies to chatos. But he then adds on, in addition, that all korbanos that are like a chatos, which is an asham as well. Says the Gemara, v'niflog nami Rabbi Eliezer beha. So the question is, why doesn't Rabbi Eliezer disagree here as well? And he should say, go ahead and apply it, because he has suggested that you can apply mixtures in the past. So, hechi liyavid, what will we tell him to do? Nesev bachutz v'hadar nesev lifnim. Would we tell him that the procedure would be to apply the blood on the outer mizbeach and then to apply it on the inner mizbeach? Kishem sha mitzvah lahaktim el yonim letachtonim, kach mitzvah lahaktim pnim lechutz. We'd have a problem. Because just as we know there's a rule that when you have two korbanos to bring, one's a chatos, one's an olah, the one that's a chatos goes first, because it gets applied on the upper part of the mizbeach, then we go down to the lower part of the mizbeach. So therefore, when we had mixtures of olah and chatos, that was Rabbi Eliezer's suggestion. We applied to the upper part of the mizbeach first, then we went to the bottom part. Here we wouldn't be able to do that. What are you going to do? You're going to put it to the outer mizbeach first. The outer mizbeach is secondary to the inside of the Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, Rashi gives us the explanation, dipnim chashuv, inside is important. Not really based on a pasuk or anything, but there's a logic to that. The inside, the korban, if you've got two korbanos, one to be brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, one to be brought on the outside of the Beis HaMikdash, the inside one should be first. That's going to be next parak to discuss which is first. If I've got different things, I've got different priorities, different korbanos, which one goes first, which one goes second, has practical implications for us in our davening. So let's put the one on the outside first. Can't do that because you're supposed to do inside first. On Pei Beis Amud Aleph, v'nesev lifnim v'hader v'nesev lechutz. So tell them to go inside first and then do outside. That is kevan de'ika chatos ve'osham dechi nichnas daman psulin lo psikale. The answer is he didn't want to tell you to do that. Why? Because even though he agrees with the Chachamim and says that theoretically that would still be valid in some korbanos, there are korbanos that couldn't work because the blood of an outer chatos or the blood of an osham that goes into the Beis HaMikdash is going to be invalid, as we're going to learn in a moment. So therefore, he couldn't say the procedure for mixing an outer blood with inner blood is to go inside first, because that's not going to work half the time. That's going to work only for shlomims and those kinds of korban. It's not going to work for a chatos and potentially not for an asham, and not for an asham according to himself, right? He's Rabbi Eliezer, so he couldn't do that. So therefore, that's why he can't do that. Now, the next thing is, if the blood went in, Rabbi Eliezer says, that Rabbi Akiva said that it's no good. Says Shahaya Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says any blood that is an outer korban goes inside the Beis HaMikdash is invalidated. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Mashal Mahadavar Domeh. So I'll tell you what this is like. I'll tell you why. Now that you've got this, why this can't be, because because we're going to learn this pasuk. Imagine l'talmid shemazag l'rabo bechamin. Imagine that a student was pouring hot water for his teacher, right? Let's say,
and he mixed the cup.
Right? For example, Yehuda brings me the coffee every morning. Okay, so great. Va'amar lo mazugli, right? So then I say, Yehuda, bring me a cup of coffee.
Sure. You want to
Right?
I'll get it to you now.
What Yehuda's he's gonna ask me, what do I want different in it? Because I've already got a cup of coffee, and he already made a cup of coffee. He's already gonna. If I call him up before the shiur and say, Yehuda, make me a cup of coffee this morning, he's gonna make one for me every morning. I don't have to ask him. So therefore, if I ask him today, he's gonna say, why? What's different? Do you want sugar in this one? Do you want cream? Something must be different because you're asking, right? So therefore, Amar lo, but Amar lo bechamin anuos. So he says so. Amar lo, ba'me amar lo. So he says, what is he telling me to? What is he telling me to add on here? So lo bechamin anu asukim. Achshav, are we not already dealing with hot water? Right. That's what he was doing. He was pouring him a cup with hot water. So now bein bechamin bein mitzonin. So therefore, now that the Rebbe is asking me for additional, I would have given it anyway. I must be including something different.
I'll make you next time. I'll make you coffee with cold water.
Right, so there you go. For example, hachanami. So too, this what's going on here. Mechti. Let's take a look at our pasuk. The pasuk says bechatos askinon va'asi. The parsha is talking about. We're talking about Perek Vav pasuk Yud Aleph of Vayikra. It says zos toras hachatos. This is the rule of a chatos. Chatos de kos of Rachmana. The Torah is talking about a chatos. Lamali, right? The whole parsha of Perek Vav is talking about achatos. Why does the Torah then conclude and say zos toras achatos? This is the rule of achatos. Ella, clearly, what's going on? This is almost like an explanation of the im eno inyan concept, I think, right? The im eno inyan. If I've already understood it without having to write that phrase again, then that phrase must be coming to include something that otherwise would not have been included. So lav chatos kamin ella kol kodshim. I'm not trying to include a chatos because that's already included. It must be. I'm talking about all of the other korbanos as well. And that's coming to tell me that this rule about blood being invalidated by going into the Beis HaMikdash doesn't only apply to a chatos, it applies to all korbanos. That's how Rabbi Akiva learns it. So any blood from any outer korban that goes into the Beis HaMikdash, according to Rabbi Akiva, from this extra word chatos, tells me that it's going to be invalidated. And now that I've got an invalidated puzzle blood in my mixture, so now Rabbi Eliezer didn't want us to be able to apply that. As we had said, we had puzzle blood mixed with regular blood. We talked about the gzeira, that potentially this is likely to potentially occur, and therefore we don't want to wind up in a circumstance where somebody might pour the blood that's puzzle by itself. So therefore, we're going to pour the whole thing out. Okay, that's what Rabbi Akiva says. Now, Maskifla Rav Huna, a braid Rav Yeshua. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, asks the following question: Mechti. Let's take a look at this more closely again. Israbu kol kodshim legabe mizbeach. So he says, when it comes to in the beginning of the parsha, that says, it says this is Perik, same pasuk. The parsha continues, later on in pasuk Chaf Aleph and Chaf Beis, right? The pasuk tells us a new rule about marika and shtifa. Marika and shtifa is that when I've got blood from the korban that goes into a container or utensil, I've got to wash that utensil out. I've got to clean it out. Can't leave any of that left over because that blood is kodesh. I've got to get it washed out. As we also had learned that even if you get blood onto the garments of the kohen, it also has to be washed out, right? So chatas dekasav rachmana lamali. So he says, if that's the case, so then why does the pasuk tell me that this applies to a chatos? Shmamino chatos in midi achrini lo. So therefore, the reason why the Torah tells us that this rule applies to a chatos is because I might have thought it applied to everything. Chatos means that this rule of marika and shtifa, of cleaning out the utensils, only applies, right? Only applies to a korban chatos. So therefore, what this is telling me is that I would have thought all korbanos, but now it tells me, this pasuk is telling me that it only applies to a chatos. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva, why does the Torah goes out of its way, where it's already talking about all korbanos, to tell me single it out as a chatos? So Rabbi Akiva, it seems that you're incorrect in your understanding of this parak. It seems like this parak is really only singling out chatos. That's what Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua says, as far as Rabbi Akiva is concerned. So therefore, he says, what about your nice comparison to the Rebbe who was asked for hot water? V'halodomya, it's really more similar to a circumstance as it started off that the Rebbe was asking for hot or cold, right? Sometimes he gets hot, sometimes he gets cold. Amarlo al timzogli elechamen, and the Rebbe says, no, just give me hot today. That's a limiter, right? It's not an expander, right? Rabbi Akiva was looking at it as, we were already dealing with only one korban, therefore it's expanding all korbanos. Says Rav Huna, Breder of Yeshua, no, the parsha is talking about all korbanos. And therefore, when it says chatos, it's excluding the others and only including individuals. Ella. So that's not the explanation for why Rabbi Akiva holds what he holds. Ella, a better explanation of Rabbi Akiva is to Rabbi Akiva, mechatos v'kol chatos. It's from the fact that the pasuk says chatos first, and then it says kol chatos, right? Then it expands. It says not only a chatos, all chatos, which means to include, ironically, not just chatos, right? Because chatos would mean a chatos. What does kol mean? Kol means everything. So even though it says kol chatos, the word kol is extra, and the Torah doesn't have any extra words. Therefore, that word comes to include all of the korbanos, to tell me that's where Rabbi Akiva learns his rule, that all korbanos are going to be included in being invalidated when they come into the Beis HaMikdash. From the word v'kol. Titania, and I have a brisa that supports that view and understanding of Rabbi Akiva, that he says, chatos, the pasuk says, v'cho chatos asher yuva midama. First, we'll talk about the word chatos. This, right, the pasuk says, any blood that is brought into the Ohel Moed, lechaper ba'kodesh, lo se'achel, should not be consumed, but ish tisafrit shall be burned, right? It means that once the blood is brought into the Beis HaMikdash, the blood is invalidated. So, it says the word chatos. Ein li ela chatos. I might have thought that this rule only applies to a korban chatos. Kodche kodchem minayin. How do I know to include other holy korbanos? Talmud lomar kol chatos. Right? It has the word kol to include everything, meaning anything that's like a chatos. All korbanos that are like a chatos. So that's going to include kodche kodchem, the higher level korbanos. Kodche kalim minayin. What about the lesser level korbanos? The kodche kalim. How to include those? Talmud lomar vecho chatos. There's a word "and" at the beginning of that too, right? Not only is it the chatas, not only is it all korbanos like a chatas, it's and also the other ones that are also korbanos as well. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's how Rabbi Akiva learns that all of the bloods that from any korban goes into the Beis HaMikdash become invalidated. Amar lo Rabbi Yossi Haglili, to which Rabbi Yossi Haglili retorts, Afilu atamar be kol hayom kulo, eino shom yelach. Even if you were going to do this drasha all day long, I don't buy it. Right? Rabbi Akiva, what are you doing here? You're saying a chatos, then you have kol, then you have vikol. You've got all these extra words. Every time you add something on, you're adding more korbanos in. I don't buy it, says Rabbi Yossi Gali. I'll tell you. Ella, chatos, I would tell you to explain the pasuk like this. The pasuk says chatos, a sin offering. Ainli ella chatos yochid. That means that, what's the majority of sin offerings? An individual person doesn't vary, brings a korban chatos. When it says a chatos, I would have assumed that was the chatos that we're talking about. Now, there are lots of other types of chatos, but when the Torah says a chatos goes into the Beis HaMikdash, becomes invalidated, I might have thought it's the plain meaning, the simple, plain, regular chatos that everybody thinks of, the sin offering. I did a wrong thing, I bring a korban. That's what it means. Chatos tzibor minayin. How do I know that this rule of invalidating the blood also applies to a chatos, which is a community offering, as we bring sin offerings that are for the community on the Rosh Chodesh, on Yom Tovim, right? Talmud Lomar, kol chatos. That means to include all of the chatos. So it's not including other korbanos, it's just including other korban chatos. Ve'en li ela chatos zachar. So now that would only include male korban chatoses. Chatos nekeva minayin. How about the female ones? So Talmud Lomar v'chol. Therefore, it says vechol, the extra vav, to include both the male ones and the female ones.
Why would female ones be excluded?
It's a great question. So Gemara is going to ask that right now. Klape raya. This is a little bit backwards because, as we know, regular korban chatos, almost every korban chatos is a female animal, right? A korban chatos that an individual brings is a female animal. The korbanos tzibor are generally female animals. The one that's really a male animal is the nasi. Right? The nasi brings his goat, that's a male korban. If I'm going to include all of the korbanos, I would have included the female ones first. That's the regular majority. Mainstream korban chatas is a female animal. Why would you then think to include male animals first and then include the female ones from the extra vav? So he says, Ella hachikamer, we got to change the text, right? Because you're right on point. Ein li ella chatas nekeva. I would have presumed, just based on the word chatos, female chatos. Then call also the tzibur ones, but also female ones. Chatos zachar minayin. How I know to include all of the chatos, even the ones that are male? Talmud lomar vechol chatos. That's why to include the extra vav. Vechol, even those minority of korban chatos that are male are also included. That if their blood goes into the Beis HaMikdash, they're ruined.
Actually, and female goat is called doe or nanny.
A nanny goat, I did know, right? A doe, I thought was a deer. A female deer.
Deer, female.
That's how it goes. That's how I would have known, right? But thank you. That is important to know, right? You have to know your rams, your does, your ewes.
You does and don'ts.
You're right. Your ewes, your don'ts, your do's, right? The do's and don'ts. Okay, so that's what you have to know. Now, that's the argument between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Agli. Rabbi Akiva says all korbanos invalidated when they go into the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Yossi says only, Rabbi Yossi Agli says only the korban chatoses that go in are invalidated. Rabbi Eliezer is going to throw the ashram into the mix, right? And that's going to make our rule of our Mishnah is going to be dependent on that. When I mix blood that's from an outside korban with blood from an inside korban, now I'm in trouble because now I can't go inside because I'm going to create puzzle blood by going inside, and if I do that, then now everything is I can't throw anything. So therefore, I just spill the whole thing out in the amma into the little stream that they had there. They'll drain. Problem is, Rabbi Yossi Aglili is criticizing Rabbi Akiva's drasha, but he doesn't hold of his own drasha. This v'chol chatos, he uses this word v'chol chatos for a different explanation altogether. Vehatanya, did we not learn in Rice? Rabbi Yossi Glili, Rabbi Yossi Glili says, Kol ha'inyan kulu ena medaber elo beparim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim lisrof pesulehan abes habira ve'lamod belo sasei alachilaso. So this whole section, this parsha, Rabbi Yossi Glili, his opinion is that this pasuk is not talking about bringing blood in. He says it's these bulls that are supposed to be burned outside the camp after their blood is applied inside the Beis HaMikdash, and the goats also. So that means that you're supposed to burn the puzzle. If those animals become invalidated, then you have to burn them on the Beis Habira, because you're supposed to burn them in a place. There's a mound that was in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Azara, right? Not to bring it outside. The ones when these korbanos are brought properly, their bodies, the animal carcass is brought outside of the three camps outside Yerushalayim and burned there. But if it is invalidated, you burn it right there in the Azara, right? And also ve'ala below saseh. Also, if you and also to tell you that if you eat and consume these korbanos, you have violated a commandment, right? It says if the person who eats them, right? Because the pasuk says, person who eats them, whether they're kosher or not, they're not supposed to be eaten at all. So then you're going to get a mitzvah's aseh. So that's what this pasuk is talking about. So amrulo, that's what this pasuk v'chochatas asher yuva midama olamoid lechaper bakodesh lo seachel. You cannot eat it, lo saseh for eating it. Ba'ish tisaref, you shall burn it in a place that's not the same place as you burn the rest of him. That's what this pasuk is talking about. It has nothing to do with blood being invalidated when going into the Beis Hamikdash. Amrulo, the Chacham said to him, Chatas shenichnas dama lifnei v'lifnim minayin. So if that's the case, how do I know that if I bring blood into the Beis Hamikdash that it's invalidated? Amar len lahem, he says from the pasuk, it says, Hein lo huva. They're not allowed to be brought. Blood is not allowed to be brought into the Beis Hamikdash. This is, it was not brought. This is talking about the fateful day that Aaron's sons died while they were inaugurating the Mishkan. And what happened was there was a chatos that was not being eaten, it was being burned. And Moshe Rabbeinu was very upset. He didn't understand why Aaron was not eating it. And he said to Aaron, why are you not eating this korban? Of course, Aaron was an onain that day, and he had done the korban, but he wasn't eating it. So in his defense, right, Moshe says, right, Moshe, as he's questioning, he says, you should be eating it because the blood was not brought into the Holy of Holies, indicating that if the blood had been brought into the Beis Hamikdash, it would have been invalidated. So therefore, from that pasuk, you know that blood brought into the Beis Hamikdash is invalidated. It's not from this pasuk at all. So Rabbi Yossi Haglili has a different source altogether for that rule. So therefore, the question is, how is he picking on Rabbi Akiva with his v'chochatos when he doesn't even use v'chochatos for that purpose? So the answer is, lidvar of the Rabbi Akiva Kamar. He was saying, oh, you're right, I don't agree with Rabbi Akiva's drush at all. I'm just saying that Rabbi Akiva, even if what you're saying is correct, that there's a word chatos applies to the blood, and then kol chatos applies to the other korban, that whole drasha of chatos, kol, and vikol, I don't even buy that drasha, even if I agreed with you. Right? Don't include other korbanos from that drasha. I would have included chatos and another type of chatos and another type of chatos. So your drasha, even if you don't agree with me, and I agreed with you that this pasuk is talking about blood, it still wouldn't help you. That's what Rabbi Yossi Haglili is saying. He doesn't really hold of that drasha. He's just really picking on Rabbi Akiva's drasha. Okay, so next Mishnah. Chatos shekibel dama b'shnei kosos. Let's say you have a korban chatos, and you catch the blood in 2 utensils. Right? So you're supposed to catch a whole utensil, blood keeps coming out, you get the second one. Now you got 2 cups of blood, and we learned that as long as you apply one of them, you're fine. But now the blood is from the same animal. So how linked is the blood of these 2 animals? It becomes interesting, right? Yotza echad mehen lachutz. If one of them gets brought outside of the Beis Hamikdash area into the Azara, hapnimi kosher, the one that remained inside, is still valid. The cup that went outside is no good. You can't bring that blood in as a korban, but the blood that was still inside, that's still fine. Nichnas echad mehem lifnim. However, if you brought one of those cups into the Beis Hamikdash, which we said also nullifies the blood, Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Machshir Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, the one that remains outside is still kosher. Bachitzon, right? V'chachamim psulit poslin. The Chacham say, no. The one that's in the Beis Hamikdash, in one that's in the Azara, is also nullified. The 2 are linked. When you bring one cup into the Beis Hamikdash, the other one is now invalid as well. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says to the Chacham, how do you figure that? Ma'im b'makom shemachshava poseles bachutz lo asa es hameshuyar kayotze. Look, we have a concept of pigul, right? Pigul is when I slaughter the offering and I have in mind, well, pigul is outside of the right time, but chutzlah is if I have in mind that I'm going to do it outside the right place, right? If I'm inside the Beis Hamikdash and I do avoda of the korban, and I have in mind that I'm going to do the throwing of the blood outside the Beis Hamikdash, that thought invalidates the korban, right? So that means that thinking outside is a very severe problem because even thinking about it ruins it, right? Don't even think it, as they say, right? So if you think about outside, you're going to ruin it. But the rule is that if you think about outside, we agreed that the blood that's still in the Azara is okay. If I have in mind that I'm going to throw this blood in the Kodesh, in the Beis Hamikdash, that's not chutz l'makom, that's not going to invalidate my blood. So then, why would it be stricter and invalidate the blood that's sitting in the Azara? right? The one that goes outside is worse than inside. So therefore, if outside doesn't ruin my cup of blood that's still sitting in the right place, then inside the Beis HaMikdash shouldn't ruin it either. That's Rabbi Yosef Galila's logic. The Chachamim do not answer in the Mishnah, but the Gemara is going to bring up Raisa that is going to expand this conversation.
They don't explain in the Mishnah?
Yeah, why? Because the Mishnah is succinct. The Mishnah's text gives you the general broad brushes, and then when you're interested, you'll go read the Braisos, which the Gemara will bring for us. Nichnas lechaper. Now, let's say somebody brings blood of a chatos into the Beis HaMikdash. According to everybody, that's going to invalidate it. But at what point does it become invalidated? Afa pishelo kiper puzzle. Even if you haven't applied that blood onto the mizbeach inside, Rabbi Eliezer says it invalidates as soon as you walk into the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Ad sheyechaper. It has to be. You have to apply it to the mizbeach, the inside mizbeach. The little small gold mizbeach that was on the inside. Once you apply the blood to that, that's when it becomes invalidated. Rabbi Yehuda says, Im hichnis shogeg kosher. If you brought it in negligently, right? You thought that this was blood that was supposed to be brought in, then that's kosher.
How's it kosher out of negligence?
How's it kosher? Because it only if you brought it in with purpose to apply it, even according to the Chachamim, right? Even according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that it doesn't have to be applied, you have to bring it in with the intention to apply it, right? Rabbi Yehuda says, no, if I just brought it in because I thought, hey, this is the right blood, and somebody yells from outside, hey, don't take that blood, that's the wrong one, that's a shogeg, go ahead and bring it out, you have not invalidated the blood yet. Kol adam and poslin, right? All blood, right, is going to, one second, wrong page here. Kol dam of poslin, all blood that went outside of the azara, right? Whether it is or whether it goes inside the Beis HaMikdash, that becomes invalid. Shenosnu al gabei mizbeach, if it then gets applied to the mizbeach afterwards, so then lo hurtza, it is not acceptable, right? The owner doesn't get any atonement for it, as we say, it's invalidated. Hatzitz. Achechaper lo hirtza hatzitz ela alatame. The tzitz, you might think, well, the tzitz is that head plate that says Kodesh Hashem that the Kohen Gadol wears. Didn't we say that it makes invalid korbanos valid? Shouldn't that help you? So the answer is no, not really. It only makes valid one type of korban if it's a tamei korban, right? A korban that's tamei that the blood gets applied, it will say that one's acceptable, not all mess ups. This mess up that the blood was brought into the wrong place doesn't help you. Tzitz meratz ala tamei, vena meratz ala yotze. Tzitz can help you in a circumstance where the korban is tamei, where the person who's bringing it is tamei. Tzitz cannot help you in a circumstance where the blood was brought into the wrong place. Okay. The Gemara. Tanya, we learned it right. So Rabbi Yosef Glili, here's the back and forth we're waiting for. Rabbi Yosef Glili says, Kal v'chomer, I've got a Kal v'chomer here. Ma b'makom shemachshava poseles b'chutz lo pasel dam shebachutz es shebifnim. If when I'm thinking about the outside, right, that's a serious avera. It's going to ruin my blood. But we said, nevertheless, if somebody actually brings the blood outside, it's not going to invalidate the second cup, which is in the azara. Makom she'ein machshava poseles, if I'm talking about a place where thought doesn't invalidate, i.e. bifnim, inside the Beis HaMikdash, eino din shelo yifsol dam shebifnim. It shouldn't, as shebachutz. The blood that's in the Beis HaMikdash shouldn't invalidate the blood that's in the second cup, which is in the azara. Right? That's his logic. Amru lo, so they say back to him, Harehu Omer, the pasuk says, Asher yuva midama, that you bring from its blood, afilu miktzas dama. It's even if it's a little bit of the blood, the whole blood is ruined, right? If you bring a little bit of the animal's blood into the Beis HaMikdash, Gzeros HaKosov, your logic is there, but the pasuk says otherwise. So therefore, you just got to go with the pasuk. Amar lahem. So he says back to them, okay, well, we'll go the other way. Kavachomer liyotze me'ata. Well, if that's true, then let's go the other way. Uma b'makom shein machshava poseles bifnim posel dam shebifnim es shebachutz. Now that you've told me that the pasuk says that where I think about blood that's in the Beis HaMikdash, that doesn't invalidate my blood, and nevertheless, you've now told me that if I bring that blood inside the Beis Hamikdash, it's going to invalidate the blood that's in the cup, that's in the courtyard, then for sure, makom shemachshava poselas bachutz eino din sheyifsol dam shebachutz es shebifnim. Then when I go to the strict case, which is bringing the blood outside, because if I think about outside, it's going to ruin my blood, then for sure when I bring the blood outside, it should ruin the blood that's in the cup that's in the azara, right? I'll go your way. If you're telling me that inside the Beis Hamikdash is stricter, fine. Then that means that if it gets brought outside, it should also ruin it. Amrulo, they said to him, no. Harehu Omer, the pasuk says, Asher Yuva, that gets brought in. Hanichnas posel ve'ena yotze pasel. The pasuk says, this is only a problem if some of the blood gets brought into the Beis Hamikdash, not if it gets brought outside of the Azara. So therefore, the pasuk is specifically telling me that while your logic makes sense, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the logic is there, the pasuk tells me don't follow the logic. The pasuk says this is not one of those logical circumstances. When you bring blood of part of the blood inside the Beis Hamikdash, that's going to invalidate what's in the cup outside in the courtyard. But if you bring part of the blood outside the courtyard, that's not going to invalidate the blood that's still in the courtyard. Ask me why. Don't know why. Pasuk says that's why. So that's what they tell Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Now, utehei machshava bifnim poselas mikavachom. Now, the Gemara says, let's take it one step further. Now that you've told me that this rule doesn't quite make logical sense, well, why can't we deduce that an intent, right? If the blood going into the Beis Hamikdash ruins the blood in the cup, then why can't we presume also that if you have thought to bring the blood into the Beis Hamikdash, that also should ruin it now, right? Then it's at least you clearly see going into the Beis Hamikdash is worse than going out of the Azara. So if going out of the Azara, thinking about going out of the Azara ruins it, so now thinking about going into the Beis Hamikdash should also ruin it. He says, look, if you're talking about a circumstance where the blood that goes outside the Azara doesn't ruin the blood that's inside the Azara, nevertheless, you hold that thinking about going outside is going to ruin that blood. Makom pasol dam shebifnim as dam shebachutz, enodin shtei machshava poselas bifnim. So then, why shouldn't we presume that just since we bring the blood into the Beis Hamikdash, that does ruin the blood that's in the Azara? Why shouldn't we presume that also thinking about going inside should ruin it? So the answer is again pasuk. That's why. Pasuk. Harehu Omer, the pasuk says, Bayom hashlishi, the pasuk that we've learned, that we remember, that was used for teaching me the rule of pigul and the rule of chutz l'mkomo, chutz l'zmano, chutz l'mkomo. This famous pasuk says that it has to be on the third day. Pigul is the third day, right? I have in mind that I'm doing it outside the right time. But the Yom HaShlishi, the third day, also is interpreted a different way. Pei Beis and Beis. Malkom shehei mishulash bedam bebasar bemurim. This is an invalidation, the place that has to be where there is three things. There are three things that can be done in this place. The three things are application of blood, the consumption of meat, and the burning of the fats on the mizbeach. V'lo tehei machshava poselas bach. So therefore, we see. That the only time that these three items, right, were permissible when there were bamos outside of the Azara. There was never a circumstance where all three of these things could be done inside the Beis Hamikdash. So if I have in mind to bring my blood outside of the Azara, so that is a place that's meshulash, a place that has all three of these things, because a bama could have been used to be brought like that, and so therefore that's going to invalidate my blood or the rest of my korban with thoughts. But inside the Beis Hamikdash, we don't burn fats or any of those kinds of things. We do apply blood, but we don't eat meat in there, right? We had talked about that. I guess was we said that we said it was kosher if you did, I suppose, but we don't burn fats in there. So therefore, that's not a place for. It's not a place for these three things, so therefore it doesn't invalidate. Now, velote machshava poselas b'chutz mikal v'chomer. So let's go the other way then. If thinking about blood going into the Beis Hamikdash doesn't invalidate the korban, then where we know it's stricter because if you bring the blood inside, it's going to ruin the blood in the Azar, then thinking about outside shouldn't ruin it either, because thinking about outside should be less severe. If the blood that is in the Beis Hamikdash ruins the blood that's in the courtyard, so then the blood that, just thinking about the blood in the Beis Hamikdash, we just learned the pasuk tells us, is not going to invalidate it. The place where the blood that goes outside as shebifnim, when the blood is brought outside, it doesn't ruin the blood that's in the azara. Then I shouldn't be invalidating the korban when I think about it outside either. Talmud Lomar Shlishi. Therefore, the pasuk says Shlishi chutz lizmano pigul chutz limkomo. So this pasuk says Shlishi to tell me that the whole pasuk is v'im he'achol ye'achal mibasar zevach shlamav b'yom hashlishi. If you eat this meat of the shlamim on the third day, then that's no good, which we said can't be talking about nosar, actually eating it, because there's another pasuk about that. We said that is talking about outside its right time. The pasuk says, the pasuk says shlishi, we're going to learn, but it doesn't have to say that, but the third day is chutz lizmano, tells us that the third day outside of the proper time is pigul. Right? So then the pasuk says, pigul yiyah, again, says that's pigul yiyah, it shall be pigul. It's talking about another case that we said was chutz l'makom, that was outside of its right time. So therefore outside of its right location. So therefore that pasuk told me not only wrong time, but also wrong location. Thoughts are going to invalidate it. So therefore that's not only wrong location inside the azara, inside the Beis Hamikdash, it's also outside the azara. So therefore, despite the fact that we tried in all different ways, this law just doesn't make that much sense. It's all just a matter of psukim, right? Think about outside, it ruins it. Think about inside, it doesn't ruin it. Bring the blood outside, it doesn't ruin it. Bring the blood inside, it does ruin it. Okay, it's opposites, but that's the way it is. Basar hayotze lechutz pasal, right? If you bring meat of a korban that is supposed to be eaten in the azara, so that invalidates the meat. Hanichnas lifnim, but if you take it into the Beis Hamikdash, as we have discussed a little bit in the past, it's kosher. Sheyehei badin sheyif sheposel. I might have thought, logically speaking, that it should be invalidated. Because again, these kal v'chomers. If bringing outside doesn't ruin the blood in the azara, basar yotze lechutz pasal, you bring the meat outside, it's invalid. Makom shepasal dam es eno din sheyifsol. So then I should think inside is more severe because it ruins the blood that's in the azara. In that case, if I bring the meat into the Beis Hamikdash, it should also become invalidated. Hari Omer, the pasuk says again, not true. Mi dama velo basar. Bringing the blood into the Beis Hamikdash invalidates it, not the meat. Bringing the meat inside the Beis Hamikdash doesn't invalidate it. Now, kal v'chomer, let's go to kal v'chomer the other way then. Me'ata, if you're going to tell me that the blood that goes into the azara is going to, blood that goes into the Beis Hamikdash is going to ruin the blood that's in the azara, so then basar hanichnas lifnim kosher. If you bring the blood into the Beis Hamikdash, it's still okay, even though the Beis Hamikdash seems to be the stricter place. Makom shelo pasal dam shebachutz es shebifnim. So if I go to the outside the azara, which invalidates only the blood but doesn't invalidate the blood inside the azara, which seems like a lesser place, basar yotze lechutz eno din shekosher, then for sure if I bring meat outside it shouldn't invalidate it. Hari Omer, the pasuk says, ubasar b'stei treifa lo sochelu. If I bring the meat out to the field of the treifa, I shall not eat. Kevan sheyotza basar chutz lemechitzaso. This tells me once the meat goes outside of the boundaries of where it's supposed to be brought, Nesar, it becomes prohibited. Again, even though there's logic to say otherwise, the psukim tell me what is not acceptable. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learned. Pnima, right? Pasuk says pnima. Pasuk, the whole pasuk is hein lo huva es dama ela kodesh pnima, because the blood was not brought to the kodesh inside. Ein li ela pnima. Pnima sounds like the Kodesh HaKodashim, the inner chamber, right? That's what the word Pnima. So, Heichal Minayin, how do I know to include the regular Beis Hamikdash that invalidates the blood as well? Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, El HaKodesh Pnima, to the holy place inside. So it's two places, the holy place and then Pnima. The Yomer
Kodesh.
Vayomer Kodesh, Ve'al Tomer Pnima. So just say Kodesh. Why do you have to say Pnima? So after all, once you get into the Kodesh itself, once you get into the Beis Hamikdash, it's invalidated. How are you going to get into the Kodesh HaKadoshim without going through the Kodesh? It doesn't matter. Once the Kodesh invalidates it, I don't need to know the Kodesh HaKadoshim invalidates it. Amar Rava says, Bazev Elim Adazeh. The answer is because I wouldn't know one without the other. Because if I didn't know that the Beis Hamikdash was already bad, then the word Pnima wouldn't mean the Kodesh HaKodashim. The Pnima would have only meant the Kodesh. For example, Miti Dahava Toshav V'Sachir. We have other situations like this as well. We have the words Toshav, a person, a slave who dwells, and a slave who works, a Sachir, who is I guess hired. So we don't know what the explanation of those two types of slaves is in Eved Ivri. These are two types of slaves, right? Person steals and he has to go into service for the person he stole from until he pays off the debt.
I think the slave who gets hired maybe has more benefits than the person who...
So one is going to be more strict than the other. That's exactly what's going to happen. Now, Titania, we learned in a Brisa. Toshav, so the word Toshav, right? These are the people who go free at Yovel, right? The people who go free at Yovel are both the Toshav and the Sachir. Toshav zek kanoi kinyan olam, and that's the person who had the all stuck in his ear, and he's going to stay for the entire time. He still goes free.
Gets a hole punched in the
Hole
ear.
punched in the ear. That's correct. And Sachir is zek kanoi kinyan shanim, and the Sachir is the guy who's only there for a number of years, for his 6 years of service until he pays off his debt.
That's why we take him for the service afterwards.
So Yomar Toshav al Yomar Sachir. Once you told me that the guy who's there permanently, he goes free. Of course, the guy who's there less goes free. Why does the Torah tell me that? Vani Yomer Kanoi Kinyan Olam Eno Ochel Kanoi Kinyan Shanim. I'm sorry, that's not talking about going free. This is talking about whether somebody who is owned by a Kohen can eat a korban. So since he's an Eved Ivri, he cannot. He's not an Eved Kanani. Eved Kanani is owned, his body is owned by the Kohen. So he's become part of the Kohen's family and can eat a korban. But an Eved Ivri is not, his body is not owned. He's still his own person, really. He's just working off in servitude for the debt that he owes. So he can't eat the korban. So now, once you told me that the guy who's there, who's in for longer service, he can't eat the korban. For sure, the guy who's in for shorter service can't. So therefore, why did you have to tell me both? So the answer is Ilukain ha'yisi omer toshav zek konei kinyan shanim. If you had only told me one of the words, I would have presumed that it was the lesser of the two cases. I would have presumed that toshav meant the guy who's there for shorter term. Ava konei kinyan olam yehe ochel. So therefore, but somebody who was there for the longer term would be able to eat. Basachir, therefore, the pasuk tells me two different words. The word sachir v'limin al toshav. The word sachir teaches me about what the word toshav means. Sachir means one thing, toshav means the other. Therefore, sachir means the one who's in for the shorter term, and toshav means for the longer term. But I only know that the word toshav means the longer term because I already have a different word that I know means the shorter term. The word toshav itself doesn't necessarily mean the longer term. Shezek kanoi kinyan olam v'zek kanoi kinyan sham ve'eno ochel, and therefore neither of them can eat. So Amar Le'Abba.
Are we saying that the pasuk where we learned the terms toshav and sachir is actually this pasuk?
The word, no, we're saying that. Well, which pasuk? What do you mean? Like, since the words toshav and sachir are used to describe the people who cannot eat the korban, we know that toshav and sachir are two different things. One is stricter than the other. Therefore, we're using the same logic applied to our pasuk, which says kodesh and then says pnima. I wouldn't have thought pnima meant the kodesh hakodashim. Pnima could have just meant inside the Beis Hamikdash. But the fact that I have the word Kodesh teaches me the Beis Hamikdash, therefore Pnima means the Kodesh HaKodashim. It's only because I have the word Kodesh that I know the word Pnima means Kodesh HaKodashim. So I couldn't just say one and I would have known both. So Amar Le Abaye, so Abaye says, Bishlam Ahasam Tregufe Ninhu, V'afa Gav Dehavele Likra Lemichtav Nirtza Lo Yochel, Ve'idach asi b'kavachomer. So he says, no, that's different over there. He says, because even though, right, the pasuk could have just written the guy who's the nirtza, the guy with the hole in his ear, and that he can't eat. So, and then I would have said the other guy can't eat for sure from a kavachomer. Mil sadasi b'kavachomer tarch v'kasav lekra. Sometimes you see that in a pasuk. Even though something could have been learned from a kavachomer, the pasuk says it anyway. So Abaye says the word toshav probably would have meant the guy who's there for the long term. But even still, even though that's true, and I would have figured out by a kavachomer that the guy who's there for the short term also can't eat, the Torah would have written it anyway. That doesn't bother me. Elahacha, but here, kevan de ifsa behechal, once you can't bring the blood into the Beis Hamikdash, lifnei v'lifnim, my boy, why do you even need a pasuk to tell me that it can't go into the Kodesh HaKodashim? right? It's not to say, well, Pnima, I would have thought was only the Beis HaMikdash, but who cares though? At the end of the day, it's an unnecessary rule because I can't get to the Kodesh HaKodashim until I go through the Kodesh. And as soon as I walk into the Kodesh, it's puzzle. Ella Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, no, I will tell you why. There's two psokim. Lo nitzracha ela derech mishupash. If you go through a back window or through the through the roof, right? If you get into the Kodesh Kodashim a different way, you might have thought that it isn't nullified because it has to go through the Kodesh. If you've only said Kodesh, it would have only been through the Kodesh. Therefore, the word Pnima comes to tell me the Kodesh HaKodashim itself also invalidates the blood, regardless if you've gone through the Kodesh. And it's not automatic.
You parachute down from
Correct.
space.
Now, we're gonna see that in the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash, right? The way that they had gold plates on the inside walls of the Kodesh HaKodashim, and when they needed maintenance, they had a chute that they would lower somebody in a box so that they would only be in this one area facing the wall that was surrounding them on all sides, so they wouldn't see back into the Kodesh. So theoretically, there was some method of getting from the upper floor to the lower floor without going through the Kodesh. So that exists. Now I have to take a look what the mechanism is. That's exactly right. It was like Mission Impossible. You were lowered down from the roof so that you wouldn't.
With the face mask, or without the face mask.
Probably without, but you were in a box so that you weren't in the Kodesh HaKodashim without, because you're not allowed to be there.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
That's the maintenance crew. Amarle Rava says, V'ha haba ksiv. He says, but one second, how could you explain it that way? The pasuk says that it is brought in, right? Which means that it has to be brought not in a non-normal way. It has to be brought in a normal way. And the only normal way to go in is through the front door, which is in the Kodesh. Elamar Rava, so Rava says instead, Kol midi dechoshev alei lifnim v'lifnim lo mifsal behechal. The answer is that if you thought, right, that you were going to walk directly into the Kodesh HaKodashim and sprinkle it there, so then, since that was your intent, remember we had that issue that we had said that if you go in B'shogeg into the Kodesh, it wouldn't invalidate your Korban. So if you go right through the Kodesh, right into the Kodesh Kodashim, thinking I'm not doing anything in the Kodesh, the Kodesh wouldn't make it puzzle. Only the Kodesh HaKodashim would be making it puzzle. So if a guy walked in and said, I'm going to sprinkle this blood in the Kodesh HaKodashim, walks in 3 steps and somebody grabs him and yanks him out, the blood's not puzzle. And that's the chiddush.
I thought you're not allowed to go to Kodesh HaKodashim unless
you're not. This guy is on his own mission. He wants to decide he wants to throw blood in the wrong place.
Our sons, when they walked into the Kodesh HaKodashim,
they died.
Yeah.
That is correct. Boy Rava. Rava says, Paralam davar shel tibor v'seir avodos kochavim. If you've got the bull of the Helam davar, and which is, as we had learned in Maseches Horios, where the Beis Din rules incorrectly and people follow it, and now they're bringing a korban for that, or the goat that is brought when the community does avodah zarah, shechnes daman lifnei lifnim. Now, those are supposed to have the blood applied in the Kodesh. What if you bring that blood into the Kodesh HaKodashim? If you bring it to the Kodesh, obviously it's not invalidated because that's where it's supposed to go. What if you go one step further and bring it to the Kodesh Kodashim? Is that invalidated it? Does that invalidate it? Mi amrinon el hakodesh pnima. Do you look at the pasuk and it says el hakodesh pnima kol haicha dekarinon al hakodesh karinon le pnima? Wherever there's a problem of going into the Kodesh, then there's a problem going into the pnima. Kol heicha de lo karina la kodesh, but when there's no problem going into the Beis Hamikdash, into the Kodesh, lo karina be pnima, then there's no problem going into the pnima. O dilma, or perhaps shalobim komanu. Maybe it is a problem because it's not the right place, and it doesn't matter. You went one step further than you were supposed to. Now we're going to not answer that. V'im tim salomar, and if you're going to say shalobim komanu, if you're going to tell me it's not in its proper place. Let's say I've got the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur, whose blood is sprinkled in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Shehiz amidam al habadim. Now you already applied the blood. The Kohen Gadol already applied the blood inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. V'otzion lehechal. Now he goes outside into the Beis HaMikdash area. V'hechnisan. Then he goes back into the Kodesh HaKadoshim again. Is that a psul? Right? Mi amrina mekomanhu. We say, look, this blood is supposed to go into the Kodesh Kodashim. You can't nullify it as it goes back into the Kodesh Kodashim. It's just there. It's not a nullification. O dilma hol v'nafak. We say, no, it's out. It's no longer. The rest of this blood doesn't go back into the Kodesh Kodashim. Now you go back, it should nullify it. Okay, we don't answer that one. Vim tim salomar. If you're going to say hol v'nafak, once it leaves the Kodesh HaKodashim, it can't go back in. He's amidam ala parochas. Let's say you applied the blood on inside the Beis Hamikdash towards the curtain of the Beis Hamikdash. V'hotzion lemizbeach. Then you went outside to the mizbeach to pour the shirayim. Ve'echnisan. Then you go back into the Beis Hamikdash. Mahu. What happens there? Is that going to be a psul of bringing the blood into the Beis Hamikdash? After all, again, hacha v'adei chad makom hu. After all, this really is. It's only one place. That's where it was supposed to go. O Dilma Yitzia Karina Bay. Once it's already left, can't bring it back in, right? You're right. So teku. So we don't have an answer to that. Okay, so we don't have an answer to any of those questions. So we leave that by itself. Nichnas, we'll try a little bit further. Nichnas lechaper. Then it says that if you bring the blood in, even if you didn't do an atonement, as soon as you bring it in, it's puzzle, right? And that was an argument. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer says, Nemar kan lechaper bakodesh. It says that you bring the blood in to atone in the kodesh. V'nemar lehalan, and it says in another pasuk, V'cho adam lo yeh ba'ol moed bevo'o lechaper bakodesh. Nobody's allowed to be in the Beis Hamikdash area when the Kohen Gadol goes to get an atonement in the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Ma'alahola and Beshalo Kiper, just like nobody's allowed in whenever the Kohen goes into the Beis Hamikdash, into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, not only when he's actually sprinkling, as soon as the Kohen walks into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, nobody's supposed to be in the Beis Hamikdash. Afkan, Shalo Kiper. So too here, the blood is invalidated. Even if he's not actually sprinkling it, as soon as he brings it in, it's invalidated. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, no. Nemar kan lechaper, it says here, to atone, but nemar laholon, vespar chatos, vesira chatos, asher huva es damam lechaper, that he's supposed to apply the blood of the bull and the blood of the goat that was brought in order to create an atonement. Mal laholon beshi kiper, that only creates an atonement when you actually do the application on the gold mizbeach, so therefore the atonement is achieved when you actually apply it. So afkan, also here, when the word lechaper is used, it means that it invalidates it when you actually apply it to the mizbeach. Beshi kiper. But my kamiflagi, what is the point of their argument? Mar savar don and chutz michutz. One says that we're going to compare the outside to the outside, right? Ve'in don and chutz mi bifnim. We're not going to compare inside to outside, right? Outside to outside is that we're going to apply the applications that are done in the Beis Hamikdash area, not the applications that are done in the Kodesh HaKodashim. That's a different category altogether. So therefore, just like the ones that are applied inside the Beis Hamikdash area, those are only invalid when you actually apply it. So too, when you bring blood into the Beis Hamikdash area, it only becomes invalid when you apply it. Omar savar behema mi behema. The other one says, no, let's take a look at the animals. Vein don and behema me adam. That is better to take a look at the animals, right? You're telling me that you can't let a person has to clear out of the Beis Hamikdash when the Kohen goes in, and you're going to learn from that the blood that goes into the Beis Hamikdash. But blood is an animal. You can't compare what a human has to be outside to a blood that has to be outside. So therefore, it's a question of which of these two rules we are going to compare it to. Okay, so we'll stop here. I wanted to finish back. We'll finish back tomorrow, but we will pick up from there.
Shoya. All right. Volume 3 will be tomorrow.
Yes, unfortunately, you have to still bring your volume 2 for a little draft.
Sorry, guys.